So I've got a build coming up which needs to use finger joints or box joints for the corners, just for kind of strength. And to make my life a little bit easier, I've built myself a really simple table saw jig. So this is the jig I've got here. This is my normal kind of table saw sled. It's a pretty crude little thing, but what I've attached to it is this threaded rod here, a support either side, and this kind of moving brace. And that is the entirety of it. And that's allowed me to cut some a variety of different kind of size finger joints. So from down to kind of a 2mm kind of thickness of the blade, basically up to any size you want. It's a 1 centimetre finger joint there. So what I've got here is a nut on the threaded rod, and that is epoxied into the brace here, the moving kind of sled that slides along. Now this isn't a particularly great joint. I've had it fail once before, but that's only when I've been moving this thing around. In operation, this has worked very well. And so effectively to kind of cut the joint, what I'm doing is kind of clamping my 2 pieces of wood onto this brace and moving it back and forwards. So this is an 8mm piece of threaded rod, and it's basically got 7 turns per centimetre. And so using that, you can kind of work out the amounts of turns you need to do. The blade is approximately 1.5 turns. So for example, for the blade thickness kind of finger joint here, what I do is make a cut, then I rotate this 3 turns. So that's the blade thickness plus the space, and then do another cut and then rotate 3 turns. For the 1 centimetre one here, it's a little bit fiddlier, and so it's kind of holds 7 centimetres or 7 turns for a centimetre, but you could got to take the blade thickness into account. So it's effectively, I think, 5.5 turns a cutting, and then 8.5 turns spacing, and back to 5.5 turns when you're cutting, then move by 8.5. So as an experiment for the thing I actually want to build, I made this. Now it's kind of basically just 2 kind of squares, just with 1 centimetre finger joints in each corner, and just butted up with a piano hinge. As you can see, the joins are fairly good. There's the odd bit where there's some tear out, and there's the odd little bit where the sizing isn't quite right. And so what I found was that I cut these 2 at separate occasions, and so the depth, the size of the wood and the depth of the cut was different between both of them. And so I think if I need to do this again, everything has to be done at the same time. Each piece of wood has to be exactly the same length, and the depth of the cut has to be exactly the same. Otherwise, they're not going to be square, they're not going to line up, which is what I found with this test piece. I've managed to disguise it fairly well though. What I've done to hide some of the more obvious kind of problems is mix sawdust with epoxy and just kind of squeeze it into the gaps. That has proved pretty effective. It's very noticeable what's going on here, but it looks an awful lot better than the big holes that used to be there. So as far as my jig goes, it is pretty basic, and for something that is adjustable like this, I'm not quite sure if it could be any simpler. And I don't like to waste time kind of building fancy things which are never going to get used, so I'm pretty pleased with this. It is very, very quick and easy to put together. It's not going to be as good as something that's a little bit cleverer, but it definitely works. And with an electric drill, resetting it back to its start position is incredibly easy.